Trump and the United States lost billions of dollars. We break down everything and what's really happening on the ground. While Trump was screaming total victory on Truth Social at 2 in the morning, the markets were not laughing. So today, we are not doing politics. We are doing facts. Numbers. You are going to understand why this ceasefire looks a whole lot more like an American retreat than a victory. Stay with me, because in about 5 minutes, I'm going to show you something that almost no one in mainstream media is talking about. A financial move that Iran made during the war that could permanently shift the balance of power in the Middle East. Most Americans have no idea this even happened. But first, the basics. For 40 days, the United States and Israel bombed Iran. 40 days of airstrikes, missiles, and apocalyptic threats. Trump said he would annihilate Iranian civilization. He set deadlines, and then he extended those deadlines. At the end of it all, there was a ceasefire negotiated by Pakistan. Yes, Pakistan. Not NATO, and not direct US diplomacy, but Pakistan, with China quietly pulling strings in the background. Great start. And here's something worth sitting with. The last time the US relied on a third-party country to broker a ceasefire at this scale was after the Korean War. Think about what that tells you about where American diplomatic leverage actually stands right now. Let's talk money. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's faucet. 20% of all global crude oil flows through that narrow strip of water. When Iran shut it down, energy prices exploded. American companies, European allies, Asian markets, everyone took a hit. Gas prices in Europe spiked over 20% in days. Shipping insurers went into crisis mode. Major oil tankers were stranded. Lloyd's of London, one of the oldest insurers in the world, temporarily suspended new coverage for vessels transiting the region. In the United States, they burned through billions in military operations. B-2 stealth bombers repositioned to Diego Garcia, 2 carrier strike groups deployed, and tens of thousands of troops were on standby across the region. The price tag for 40 days of war? Conservative estimates put United States military spending alone at somewhere between $8 and $12 billion. That does not include the economic damage to allies, the hit to global supply chains, or the long-term cost of rebuilding diplomatic credibility. This is not a victory. It is a receipt. Let's be precise, because this part matters. The United States had a list of 15 demands. They wanted zero uranium enrichment, dismantling of the ballistic missile program, and an end of support for Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iraqi militias. Iran said no in Geneva. Iran said no in Rome. Iran said no everywhere. And now, after 40 days of war, what does Trump accept as a workable basis for negotiation? Iran's 10 points, not his, but Tehran's. Those points include a withdrawal of US forces from the region, financial compensation paid to Iran, and the lifting of international sanctions. This is where it gets truly remarkable. Iran now collects a FEE on every ship that crosses the Strait of Hormuz. A toll on an international strait, collected by Iran, accepted by Trump. Let that sit for a second. Now, stay with me here, because in a few minutes I am going to explain exactly how Iran set up the financial infrastructure for that toll before the ceasefire was even announced, and why it is almost impossible to reverse. That is where this story gets really interesting. Here is the thing no one is saying clearly enough. Before February 28th, Iran was under maximum pressure, crippling sanctions, international isolation, nuclear program in the crosshairs. And today, analysts at King's College London said it plainly. Iran is in a better bargaining position than before the war started. If 80% of its demands are met, Tehran ends up in a stronger geopolitical position than it was before the first missile was fired. Iran survived 40 days of American and Israeli strikes. It is still standing. It is negotiating on its own terms. And on the streets of Tehran, people were celebrating the ceasefire like a national victory. That is not propaganda. That is what happened on the ground. Now, Here is what they are not telling you in mainstream United States media. While the bombs were falling, Iran was quietly making 3 moves that almost no American news outlet covered in depth. Moves that will outlast this ceasefire. Moves that could change the Middle East for the next decade. We are going to go through all 3. But first, the military reality, because this part is crucial. This might be the real collateral damage of this war. Trita Parsi, one of the most respected Iran analysts in the world, put it clearly. After this failed use of force, American military threats ring hollow. Trump can still rattle his saber, but everyone saw him blink at his own 2-hour deadline. China is watching. Russia is watching. North Korea is watching. They are all taking notes. And here is a detail that barely made headlines in the US, according to intelligence assessments reported by CBS News. Iran had planted over a dozen underwater mines in the Strait of Hormuz before the ceasefire. The US Navy detected them, and they chose to negotiate anyway. That is not a coincidence. That is leverage. Tehran knew the United States could not afford a prolonged naval confrontation on top of everything else. So they played it. Okay, this is the part of the video that I think is genuinely important. Not for the politics, but for understanding what the world looks like after this ceasefire. Move number 1, the Petroleum deal, quietly expanded during the war. While US and Israeli jets were striking Iranian targets, Tehran was accelerating a bilateral agreement with China to process oil payments entirely in Chinese yuan, completely bypassing the US dollar. This had been in progress since 2023. But according to multiple financial intelligence reports, the volume of yuan-denominated oil transactions between Iran and China increased by over 40% during the 40-day war. Why does this matter? Because one of America's most powerful geopolitical weapons is dollar dominance. Sanctions only work because the global financial system runs on dollars. Every time a country successfully trades major commodities outside the dollar system, that weapon gets a little duller. Iran just proved it can survive and trade while being sanctioned, bombed, and isolated. That is a roadmap, and other countries are paying attention. Move number 2, the Strait of Hormuz toll is not symbolic. It is structural. Here is the part that should have made front-page news everywhere. As part of the ceasefire arrangement, Iran and Oman will both collect fees on vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz. This is being framed in some outlets as a minor logistical detail. It is not. It is a fundamental shift in who controls one of the most strategically important waterways on Earth. International maritime law has never formally recognized any single nation's right to charge transit fees through the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is classified as an international strait, with a guaranteed right of innocent passage under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. By accepting this arrangement, even informally, the United States is implicitly legitimizing Iranian sovereignty claims over the waterway. Legal scholars are already flagging this. Once established in practice, this precedent is extremely hard to roll back. Iran did not just survive the war. It may have used the fighting to lock in a decades-long strategic asset. Move number 3, Russia's quiet play. While everyone was focused on the US and Iran dynamic, Russia began funding the construction of a new nuclear reactor on Iranian soil during the negotiations. This was reported but largely buried under the bigger headlines. Think about what this signals. Russia is telling the world, we are not waiting to see how this ends. We are already betting on Iran's future. And with Iran potentially coming out of this conflict with sanctions lifted and a guaranteed revenue stream from the strait, Russia just positioned itself as the infrastructure partner of choice for a newly empowered Tehran. This is not a Middle East story anymore. This is a global power realignment story. What about Israel and the Lebanon problem? Here's something that's going to become a much bigger story in the coming days. Pakistan's Prime Minister announced the ceasefire applied everywhere, including Lebanon. Israel's office said Lebanon was not included in the deal. Trump said Lebanon was a separate skirmish. Iran said any attack on its allies is an attack on the ceasefire itself. So right now, at this exact moment, nobody agrees on what the ceasefire actually covers. And Israel launched its biggest single bombing campaign of the entire war on Beirut, the day after the ceasefire was announced. Hundreds were killed in a single night. If Iran decides that those actions breach the agreement, the 2-week window collapses. The negotiating table in Islamabad on Friday could either be the beginning of a historic deal or the last meeting before things get significantly worse. We'll be covering that live as it develops. Let's bring this back to something concrete. Beyond geopolitics, there is a domestic American story that is not being told honestly. Trump came into this conflict promising maximum pressure would force Iran to its knees within weeks. That was the pitch. 6 months of nuclear negotiations collapsed. The US went to war, and after 40 days and billions spent, the opening position for final peace talks is Iran's 10-point proposal. Even Trump's own vice president, J.D. Vance, called the ceasefire a fragile truce and said it had taught him a lot about Iran. That is not the language of victory. That is the language of someone recalibrating. Meanwhile, House Democrats are attempting to pass a war powers resolution to limit Trump's ability to strike Iran further. There are also quiet conversations on Capitol Hill about the 25th Amendment. Yes, seriously, that conversation is happening again. The question now is not whether Trump can spin this as a win. He will. He is already doing it. The question is whether the Islamabad talks on Friday produce anything that remotely resembles the original American demands, or whether Iran walks away with sanctions lifted, a toll on the world's most important shipping lane, and a Chinese-backed economy that is largely sanction-proof. So, victory or defeat? Trump says total and complete victory. His own allies call it a fragile truce. Iran's streets were celebrating, and Tehran is sending delegates to Islamabad, not to surrender, but to consolidate. You do the math. This ceasefire is not an ending. It is the opening round of a negotiation where Iran arrives stronger than it has been in years, and the United States arrives with billions spent, credibility damaged, and a list of demands that nobody has agreed to. The next 14 days will tell us everything. We will be here covering it. If you want to understand what's actually happening in Islamabad on Friday, the real stakes, the actual positions on the table, and what a final deal could look like, hit subscribe, because this story is moving fast, and most of what you'll see in the news will be spin. We don't do spin. We do the ground truth. See you on the next video on this channel. Financial Whisperer.